Andrew? Hello?
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you. I'm sorry for any technical difficulties. I couldn't hear you all for a moment. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council. My name is Andrew Sherwood. I'm representing KDP, and I would like to thank you for the pleasure of conducting your FY 22-23 audit. And I have some brief information related to the audits I'd like to present this evening. Have you all received a copy of the audited financial statements?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is similar to prior years. We did a couple of audits that aren't typically done unless you receive a federal single audit, meaning you spent a significant amount of federal dollars. But we issued multiple opinions. The first was conducted under generally accepted accounting standards. This is applicable to all standard financial statement audits. The next two are generally accepted government auditing standards and uniform guidance opinions. These are referred to, the generally accepted government auditing standards is typically referred to as GAGAS or Yellow Book. And these are where your single audit comes into play because you spent more than $750,000 in federal dollars. The GAGAS opinion reports on compliance with laws and regulations, and the uniform guidance opinion reports on compliance with federal grant requirements. And the last opinion that we provide is the Oregon State Regulations opinion for Oregon municipalities that spend over $500,000 per year. As a result of our audits of the city, URA, and airport, all received clean, unmodified opinions. This is what you want to get every year. And so there are no issues. This means that the financial statements were presented fairly the financial position of each of the entities in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. Resulting from the audits, we didn't have any audit findings, meaning there weren't any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses identified. Related to significant disclosures, in each of the three reports, once you get past the financial statements, in note 1, you will see it's basically the statement of significant accounting principles. And this is where you can find where the accounting treatment is for each of the entities. At the end of these, for the city and for the URA, we did report restatements. These were related to items that weren't recorded and reported in accordance with GAAP. And this is not something that's uncommon at all. Frequently on first-year audits for me, I will identify these. We did receive full cooperation from Angie and Lisa, and everything was able to be gone through quickly. For each of these items, we had really good communication. I provided guidance that showed how the accounting was required to be done, and we didn't have any disagreements. So all that went over very smoothly. In the back of the city report, I want to direct you to something that could be valuable to you this year and in the future. You don't have to have it handy, but maybe you can take a look later if you'd like. It's called the Schedule of Findings and Question Costs. In the report, it's marked page number 106, and it basically gives a summary of whether there were any internal control or compliance findings. And it also gives you what the opinion type was for the financial statements. And so on this report, the opinion type is unmodified, and there were no internal control findings or federal award findings. And so that's exactly what you want to see when you look at this report. One other thing that's important on this is whether the auditee was qualified as a low-risk auditee. And simply for the fact that the city didn't receive a single audit in the prior year, they didn't qualify as a low-risk auditee, but it didn't result in any additional programs having to be tested. So it was unavoidable, and it didn't mean there was anything wrong at the city level. I'll just go over a couple of quick financial highlights for the city, and I think for the general fund, which everyone is most concerned. There's an increase in fund balance of $1.4 million. That left an ending unassigned fund balance of $9.4 million or 86% of revenues for the year. That's a strong figure, and I think very important to make sure there's unassigned fund balance for anything that may come up. In the Urban Renewal Agency, fund balance had an overall increase between the two funds of $638,000, leaving a restricted balance for system development of $5.3 million, which the URA can spend on various development projects. In the airport, the increase in net position was nominal at $407, and it resulted in an ending unrestricted net position of $811,000 that can be used for capital projects, maintenance, and items like that. Overall, I would like to say that the audit, although it was first year and took quite a bit of effort on all of our parts, went very smoothly. Angie and Lisa and their team provided great communication. We didn't have any issues with timing. Questions were responded to quickly. Meetings took priority, and my team was never left waiting, hanging to resolve audit issues. So I want to thank Angie and Lisa. We had a great time with them. Definitely look forward to future audits. Are there any questions that anyone has about the reports?
Does anybody have any questions for Andrew or Angie? I'll ask a couple here. I'd like to call everyone's attention to page 20 of the packet. Which is, and it's Roman numeral 10 in your audit.
Okay.
As you can see, once again, our city has achieved getting the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence of Financial Reporting. Angie, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that. These things are not easy to come by, and I think that you and your staff do a great job, and I think the council agrees that you guys do a great job. So nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. I did have a question. I just saw this right before the dinner hour. On page 71 of the audit, I saw under the water fund revenues, there's seems to be a $7.8 million in parentheses on the last column. See what I'm referring to?
Is it marked page 71?
It's marked, yes, page 71 of the audit. It's page 120 in our packet.
You said it's $7.8 million?
Yeah, the last column, intergovernmental revenues, which I assume are water fees and charges, and there was $8 million budgeted, and the actual amount was $215,000, which a negative variance of $7.8 million.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a good explanation for it. But
yeah, I think that may be an Angie question.
Currently I'm trying to think about that, but give me just a minute. Maybe Dave can help me answer that.
Without having any paper in front of me, I'm going to speculate that was the Dog River Pipeline, and we had that much money awarded to us. We were projecting how much would be spent or possibly spent that first year. We barely got started that first year, so we had a much less expense. And are you looking at unrealized revenue in that year because we drew down less on those funds? Could that be what you're looking at?
could be.
Andrew, does that sound correct?
I think so. I would need to look into it, but
Yeah.
that does make sense.
And so
Yeah.
we're looking at the Water Capital Reserve Fund. We budgeted about 8 million in revenue, and we only drew down about $215,000. So that aligns with the Dog River project and how much we expended.
In my first look at this, I thought it was the operating fund, which would have been the fees and charges. That's not the case. Okay.
That was our big project in that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
The only
Thank you,
other
Dave.
thing I want to point out is that I always find these audits, the most interesting part of these audits to be the trends. which are at the end of the audit, the different trends. And I think it's something that council might be, or any citizen might be interested in looking at. For example, our assessed value has doubled in the last 10 years, which is, I think, a very healthy indicator. It also lists our leading taxpayers and how they've changed over the last 10 years. The number of businesses and how many people they employ, and the trend and the changes over the last 10 years. And also point out that the number of city employees has gone down by, I think, 5 or 10% since the last 10 years. So these are all trends I think are very interesting. So thanks for putting that together as well. So any other questions for Angie or Andrew?
I have one. It's probably an Angie question. Angie, good evening. On page 32 of our packet, which is, I think, B3 of the audit.
B3.
It's the council packet, page 32, and I don't see any other numbers on it. It's the management discussion and analysis section, second page,
Mm-hmm.
third page. It mentions that the city's taxable assessed value has increased over 1 year by 28%, plus or minus a little bit more, and that property taxes collected increased by 20%. So obviously that's a very healthy bump upward. Can you or anybody else just shed some more light on that for me? That's one could presume, I suppose, but I prefer to hear if anyone has insights specifically about that.
I think that would be the Google came online. I'm sorry, I didn't know if I could say that word.
Yeah, for further detail, that would most likely be the 2005 Design LLC abatement ending, and that property coming onto the tax rolls.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Second page 32.
Okay, no action is needed by the city council, I'm assuming. No. Okay, thank you very much.
And just final
Thank you.
comment, I just want to reiterate what the council said to you and your team for the hard work and pulling all this together and working with a new auditor. It was tough to find, but we're glad to have you on board. And thank you for your hard work and association with our staff. Really appreciate it to the both of you.
Andrew, we really appreciated working with you this year. You guys were very patient and kind, and it was great to work with you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Look forward to next year.
I'm not.
No, okay to step out now?
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 6 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member, who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker may be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the city council for up to 3 minutes on any subject which is not on the agenda? Mr. Nichols.
Thank you. Roger Nichols, 1617 Oregon Street. It's a question more. One of the things that was talked about was, what is the city going to do with the influx of money from the cancellation of the agreement with the giant manufacturer there? And I'm hoping that we'll be able to do stories on how each of the entities that are receiving new tax infusion, not just one time, but for year after year, have planned to do with that. And I understand there was a committee going to be formed. Has that happened yet? And so when and what will happen as a result of it?
Certainly. Excellent question. I think associated with the city council goal setting session that we had last fall, there was an expressed desire to certainly have that conversation both at the city level and engaging our county partners as well, and having that discussion about the upcoming SIP revenue specifically that is coming in, strategic investment program money, in the next few years as the new data centers are developed. As you know, there's a couple different components to those agreements, including a taxable component, a community service fee, and then a guaranteed annual payment fee as well. And so it will be interesting to see, associated with the community service fee, which is distributed to each of the taxing districts in that tax code area, how they will plan to use those funds. And it's my intention to have some of those discussions this year, again, associated with the council goals on how the city and or county would set some guiding policy around how those SIP funds are utilized. For the 2005 agreement that we spoke to a moment ago, that, just to be clear, that abatement wasn't canceled or terminated. That ran its 15-year timeline. And so the property taxes are now treated just like any other property tax that comes in and goes into the general fund here at the city. But the two other enterprise zone agreements, we are still currently active, and we receive fee payments from them as well.
So I want to suggest that it might be wise, since you have a new income stream, to find a good dedicated use for that, several uses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Anybody else like to speak to the council? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 7, the city manager's report. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few items for you this evening. I wanted to make sure you were all aware, and if you were planning on attending, had marked up your calendars, that the Chamber's Distinguished Community Citizen Banquet has been rescheduled to February 29th due to the winter weather we had not too long ago. And so if you got tickets previously, you should be all set for that new date. If that new date happens to work for you and you'd like to go, please reach out to my assistant, Abby. And if it doesn't work for you, please let us know as well, and we can free up that spot at the banquet. I also wanted to make note that in the audience today, we have our new facility supervisor who joined us just a little while ago, Mike Kasinger. Please stand up and take a bow, sir. And he is wasting no time getting started and working with the two facilities techs that we have here, and really diving into the maintenance needs we have, not only throughout the city and the different facilities we have, but in the downtown core as well. Mike, anything you'd like to say? Or? Right. So wanted to take a moment to introduce Mike. Thank you for joining the team.
Welcome aboard, Mike.
I appeared on the KODL Coffee Break Talk Show in the last couple of weeks, as well as had a presentation to the Kiwanis Club, which went really well, and have a follow-up presentation to Rotary next week. Opportunity coming down the pipeline later this year, but the Oregon City County Managers Association will have their summer conference actually located in Hood River this year. And so myself, the city manager of Hood River and the city manager of Cascade Locks are on the planning committee for that conference, and it's going to be in the neighborhood. So if it's something that you're interested in, please take a look at the schedule as it comes out. It's right in our backyard, and so it may be some interesting opportunities. And we will likely be hosting a couple tours within the city as well, most likely highlighting the downtown revitalization efforts that we have and the Mural Fest. To Roger's comment a moment ago, I also met with representatives from Hillsborough, who also have a strategic investment program agreement, a number of years older than ours, for Intel and a company called Genetec, to see how they've made decisions around how to use the monies associated with their agreements, what some of the best practices may be, what worked, what didn't work, what would they do different as part of the process. We're very deep and heavy into the budget process with all the different department heads that we have here. And I wanted to let the council know that we had implemented a new process for community funding requests as discussed through the last year's process. And that deadline was on January 31st. And so we received quite a few different requests from organizations that we have funded for a number of years, as well as new requests. And we're going through a process of vetting them. And I'll be sure to include all the requests in the proposed budget book as it comes forward, regardless on whether or not they receive a recommendation for funding in the upcoming budget. We're having some coordinating meetings and some outreach with the county associated with the Fort Dallas Museum and the animal control ordinances that need to be updated. And then finally, our rare volunteer, who's been with us about half her term or so, has been making good progress, in particular on two projects. One is the Waldron Drug Getchell building, and illuminating that building in the historic ghost signs that are on each side. She received some funding support from the Urban Renewal Agency, and so it's nice to see that project moving forward. And she has also been spending quite a bit of time diving into the history and current status and agreements and whatnot we have for the Dalles Wi-Fi that we have throughout the community. So we have another number of Wi-Fi sites up at Cirrhosis and the Discovery Center and a few others, maybe most notably in our downtown. And it's a system that has been the butt of a few jokes every once in a while. And so it's really great to have the resources here looking at that system. We'll likely be putting out an RFP to basically upgrade and replace that system from a modern perspective of why public Wi-Fi may be useful or helpful and where to focus in different areas throughout the community. So it's really exciting to see the RARE's progress and Moorhead's hard work on these various projects. And she'll be finishing up in July. And so hopefully we can get a number of those different things done. And with that, that's my report.
Thank you. Item 8 is city council reports. We'll start on my right with Council President McLaughlin.
Today, I attended a briefing with city manager and our mayor. Attended an airport commission meeting last week. I've been attending weekly calls or visits to many of our directors in the city. I met with, I was actually on KODL coffee break along with Mayor Mays. And let's see, today I had a meeting dealing with homelessness with police chief, legal counsel, mayor, and city manager. That's my report.
Councilor Long.
Excuse me. Yes. So on January 30th, I attended the Urban Renewal Agency meeting. As mentioned by the city manager, we discussed ghost signs at the Getchell building, and we did make approve a modest request for funding. It's pretty exciting what's going to happen down there. We also had an update on the Mill Creek Greenway project from Parks and Recreation. That's coming along quite nicely, and that's exciting for our community as well. We also discussed the redevelopment options for the now empty lot, which was commonly referred to as the Tony's building. And now that all the hazard mitigation is done, it's probably going to be easier to move forward on that. And we discussed our agency goals and objectives. And we've had some really good community support and participation at those meetings. So I encourage anyone else that wants to have input to attend as well. And finally, I took a tour of the Safe Space building. That is a place for children who have been or maybe are thought to have been either physically or sexually molested. And they just did a big project and got their building downtown or down in Hood River. And it's a nice space. They're going to be having an open house, and I really encourage people to go and see what that is. We forget that happens here, but about 60% of their clientele is from the Dalles. And you know, it's a place that kids can go after something really horrible has happened to them, and what needs to happen in order for those cases to be prosecuted happens all in one safe space. So they don't have to talk to a bunch of different people, and they don't have to go to a bunch of different places, and they have a lot of things donated, and they can do their exams and everything right there. So just encourage you to take a look at that. And then they have some real needs. So if it tugs at your heartstrings to also make a donation.
Thank you. Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On February 1st, I attended a Q-Life board meeting where we reappointed several board positions, president, vice president, secretary, and a budget officer. We reviewed revised contracting rules and updated the insurance agency of record, heard a financial analysis, and then ended it with the executive session. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On January 30th, I had also attended the urban renewal meeting. I'm pleased to follow up with Counselor Long's comments that our Tony's property, well, not having sort of a precise plan to move forward, is definitely moving forward, and we expect, I think it's fair to say, we expect to see some action on that in the coming months. The day before, I'd set aside time and had a fruitful meeting with our city manager on a variety of topics. We also had a briefing this morning with yourself and Councilor McLaughlin. On February 2nd, I had a fruitful conversation with Washoe County Sheriff Lane on the status of the Community Resolution Center and potential and hope that it moves forward and provides another really critical asset for helping neighbors in need. And this week I have several meetings that I'm hoping to attend, including a Houseless Collaborative tomorrow and the History After Hours event on Thursday.
Council Runyon.
Thank you. Q Life, Quality of Life Network meeting, which I've been on that committee between the county and city about 13 and a half, 14 years, and I still do not have a clue of the acronyms and everything that we use in that meeting, but we continue to expand the scope of the entity to bring internet to the entire county and to improve it in the city of the Dalles. And it really needs improving in the city of the Dalles. So we're working on those things. The city manager was the lead on that meeting. And then we had a impromptu walk back to City Hall meeting, in which I was concerned about the snow removal process and wanting to have a serious after action report, knowing that we did the best job we could, but there was some action around grade schools and whatnot that concerned me. And in past years, the school district would take care of the snow after the city had moved it towards the walks. The school districts, in my memory, and when my wife worked for the school district, would come along with their tractors and make parking available so the parents could get to the school. That didn't happen this year. And so I asked the city manager to contact the school superintendent and see how we could work more cooperatively. Apparently, some phone calls to the superintendent have not been expeditiously returned, and we need to continue to make that call. Also attended the local public safety community council, known as LIPSIC, which is basically legal entities from around the county and city, from state police to NORCOR to judges and attorneys in the area. It's held at NORCOR every other month. Attended the Mid-Columbia Veterans Memorial Committee today and let them know that we are going to be expanding the museum downstairs because we are going to obtain a storage facility off the loading dock at the what was the maintenance office. So I thank our new facilities manager and our city manager for working on that. Had a meeting with the mayor today, with the city manager again. Seeing you everywhere, Matthew. Just a briefing of what was going on in the community. Councilor Randall was buying some couches from a relative of mine, and while he was there, we sat down and had an impromptu counselor to counselor meeting. So I need to disclose that, and it was very interesting because we really had not done that in a good long time. A couple of citizen phone calls, and one of the most interesting, I guess, and presents a need, was the citizen would like an update on where we are on the grocery cart issue. What are the results that we're hearing and seeing? And I'd like to get back to him with some numbers if possible. The situation is that he's in his early 80s. He does not work well leaving a store. I won't mention the store, but the carts all stop at the door through some electronic device. So he can't get out of the store with a cart, and he's unable to carry his things. And it may be a problem with other elderly folks in the community. And I told him, I said, it'd really be the store's issue, but I would check on the update on what we are doing. And I explained a little bit about how the ordinance is supposed to work. And it wasn't supposed to deprive anybody of a card. It was just to get them returned, but it may not be working entirely in that direction. Some angles that we may not have thoroughly thought about, or the group that brought that all to us, which I think was the state legislature. Is that correct? Brought the cart ordinance forward?
Was one of the vehicles that we used, no pun
Yeah.
intended, I guess, for the shopping cart ordinance. And yeah, some of the stores have deployed locking wheel mechanisms either at the perimeter of their facility or like outside the parking lot,
Yeah.
or there's a checkpoint on the inside of the store when you're passing through the gates there.
We can deal with this offline. I just wanted to bring it up. I was gonna go sit out there under public notice, but, and speak for my friend, but, this is good enough anyway. That's all I have. I'll send you a whole list, Amy, as usual.
Maybe you could tell the city manager the name of the store so he can look into
I
that.
will do that offline.
Okay. As far as my report goes, on January 23rd, I did a radio interview with Mark Bailey at KACI, attended a community outreach team meeting, and also remotely attended a Mid-Columbia Community Action Board meeting. On February 7th, I met with Nate Stice from the Governor's Office Regional Solutions Office. And on February 8th, I gave a presentation to the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, and that's my report. Item 9 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any counselor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. This evening, we have 2 items on the consent agenda. Number 1 is the approval of the January 22nd council meeting minutes. And the second is a resolution concurring with my appointment of Jan Oldenburg of the City Budget Committee and Mike Courtney to the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. I'd just like to add too that both citizens are here tonight. Mr. Courtney sitting in the back, Ms. Oldenburg is right there. And Ms. Oldenburg is a graduate of our local government academy, so we're happy that we got some productive use out of some of the people that attended. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Councilor Long to approve tonight's consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10A is consideration of a services contract for the design of the East 12th Street project. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council. The city has adopted transportation system plan and the stormwater master plan. Both identify projects to install stormwater collection systems and sidewalks along East 12th Street, east of Thompson Street. These infrastructure improvements are needed to provide for pedestrian safety. And in light of the city's increased focus on demonstrated through our commitment to the ADA ramp upgrade projects we've been undertaking for the last several years. And the need for the installation of appropriate stormwater management systems. And these improvements would support both existing and future residential development in the area. This project, when constructed with those needed improvements from Thompson Street East past Morton Street to a point about 700 feet west of Richmond Street. I believe it's a little over a half mile in length. The project's included in the adopted current year budget. Due to her staff workloads, and the schedule that's necessary to meet the funding requirements, we're proposing that this project be designed and constructed using contracted services. Staff developed and advertised a request for proposal or RFP for those engineering services, to complete the surveying and design. This project was anticipated to be over $100,000, and so as we've discussed before, we utilized a qualification-based selection process whereby price is not a factor. In fact, we don't even know the price is being proposed at the time that we're receiving and evaluating the bids, or excuse me, the proposals.
We actually received 3 proposals for this project. We had an evaluation team made up of 4 public works employees, including myself. All 4 reviewers were unanimous in ranking the proposal received from Century West Engineering as the best proposal received. Some of the strong elements about that proposal that really stood out to staff was they identified the need for early coordination with other utilities in that design effort. They recognized the need to possibly have to design each individual driveway through that stretch of the project individually to maintain usable access and prevent flooding of the adjacent properties. They provided an option to capitalize on some of their prior public outreach in their projects in other communities, which they enjoyed quite a bit of success utilizing. They proposed to use a stormwater hydraulic modeling system in their design. They proposed the most robust staff allocation to meet the timeline and deadline for the project. They also stated the strongest commitment to meeting the project schedule. This project is to be funded. Money is allocated to the city from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And one of the conditions of that funding is that the project must be under contract for construction by the end of this calendar year, December 31st, 2024. As such, we've established the schedule for completing the design work by July 26th, and that schedule is critical. We negotiated a contract price of $265,455.40 with Century West for the project. Staff did compare the labor rates proposed by Century West with 2 other firms that are currently doing work for the city and found them to be consistent or in line with those other firms. In Fund 13, which is a Transportation System Reserve Fund, there's $1,547,147 allocated for the project. And out of that amount, our original estimates were that $174,127.50 would be needed for the engineering. The proposed engineering services contract is $91,327.90 more than that estimate. However, with $1,547,147 budget for the project, there are adequate funds available to complete the engineering services for the project. With that, it's staff's recommendation that the city council move to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract in an amount not to exceed $5,455.40 for contract number 2023-014. The engineering services for the 12th Street storm and sidewalk improvements contract.
Questions for Mr. Anderson?
I do have a question. It's not about accepting it necessarily, but on page 1 of 3, page 211, I think it is, the very last sentence says, once negotiations are terminated with a proposer, city cannot later go back to that proposer to reinitiate negotiations. But could they go back to that proposer and just go forward with whatever deal they offer? Can't. So it's actually more to the sentence than that.
Yes. Once you have terminated those negotiations and left that proposer and talk to the second one, you can never go back to the first. Okay. Short of issuing a RFP.
That piece was missing there, and that's why I asked you for that clarification.
Anybody else? I just want to point out that a couple of years ago, we went through quite a controversial planning community development issue with the subdivision at the corner of that Richmond and 12th Street. Actually, it was Richmond and 10th Street. And the issue of sidewalks came up because of the dangerous conditions on 10th and 12th. And I would like to think that this sidewalk would do a lot towards improving that safety situation on 12th Street.
Get some of those comments with this project.
Yeah. I don't suppose we can go back on a future developer and get part of the cost of that, but that's okay. Any other questions? Okay, we're looking for a motion.
Okay. Well, Mayor Mays, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Century West Engineering in an amount not to exceed 265,455 and 40 cents for contract number 2023-014, the engineering services for East 12th Street Storm and Sidewalk Improvements Contract.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Long to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Century West Engineering. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Got a quick question. I missed, where is Century West located? Where's
Oswego.
Okay, I missed that. Okay, thank you. Item 10B is award of a SCADA system upgrade Phase 1 engineering services contract.
Hey.
Mr. Anderson.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, the city's water and sewer systems are monitored and controlled by a computerized supervisory control and data acquisition, or SCADA system. The SCADA system we currently have was developed in two phases. The first phase, which we completed in about 1996, automated much of the Wicks water treatment plant. And the second phase we completed in 2004, integrated the city's in-city water distribution and wastewater collection systems. Our current fiscal year 2023-24 budget includes funding to undertake phase 1 of a project to update and upgrade these essential but aging SCADA systems. Phase 1 of this project will upgrade the systems at the Wicks water treatment plant, which are our oldest systems and arguably our most critical systems. Council may recall that on July 10th of 2023, conducted a public hearing and approved an exemption from competition for this engineering services contracts associated with the SCADA system upgrades. That decision authorized staff to negotiate directly with Jacobs Engineering Group for these engineering services. Jacobs was previously CH2M Engineers, and they're the firm that has designed and done all the maintenance on all of our existing SCADA systems for the last 20 years. Those negotiations have been completed, and we've got a proposed scope of work at a contrast price for consideration tonight. The SCADA system upgrade phase 1 project was estimated at $1.5 million. And of that, it was estimated that about $1 million would be for engineering services to complete the conceptual and final designs, to assist with contractor and equipment procurement, to oversee the construction of the project, to perform all the software programming and system startup testing, and to provide record drawings and updated operation and maintenance manuals. The remaining $500,000 was intended to be used for paying the electrical contractor, purchasing materials and software, fabricating control panels, and those elements of the project will be competitively procured. At the time we prepared the budget for this, we thought that we were going to focus phase 1 on the systems in town. And those systems include both water distribution and wastewater collection systems. And so the funds for the project were split between the water and the sewer reserve funds. Since then, we've decided that it would make a lot more sense and be much more desirable for phase 1 to focus on the needs at the Wicks water treatment plant. That's because, as I mentioned before, those systems are older, and key city staff that'll be relevant for the project are expected to retire within the next year or so. We wanted to capitalize on moving forward with the Wicks improvements while we still had access to these key employees. While phase 1 addressing only water system, since phase 1 will only address water system elements of the project, it needs to now be fully funded with water utility funds. So the current budget identifies that $750,000 in the water reserve fund for this phase 1 upgrade. The proposed contract amount with Jacobs is $1,030,542, and it's estimated that another $500,000 will be needed for the purchase of materials and the hiring of electricians, for a total phase 1 cost of $1,530,542. As I mentioned, the adopted budget includes $750,000 in Fund 53, the Water Reserve Fund. Fund 53 also has $450,000 in surplus from the Dog River Pipeline project. And we have $1,500,000 that's being saved for a future reservoir painting project a year or two down the road. We can use some of those funds to make up the additional $750,000 for SCADA Phase 1. The $750,000 that is budgeted in the sewer reserve fund will remain there and be used in the ultimate subsequent Phase 2 project. With that, it's staff's recommendation that the city council move to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Jacobs Engineering for engineering services related to the SCADA system upgrade Phase 1 project in an amount not to exceed $1,030,542.
Questions for Mr. Anderson? Counselor Richardson.
Good evening, Dave. Phase 2, do you expect it to be of a similar magnitude and cost or greater?
No, we expect it to be similar.
Okay. I would just like to make a personal note that the first phase of the this control system was completed in 1996, which seems like yesterday, but in fact was like 28 years ago. So some time has passed.
Just a note, I was the project manager for both those prior improvements. So, and it just seems like yesterday. I don't know why they're worn out.
They wore out before you did.
Any other questions or comments? Anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I will. Mr. Mayor, I would move that we authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Jacobs Engineering Group for engineering services related to the SCADA system upgrade Phase 1 in an amount not to exceed $1,030,542.
There's a second.
I'll second the motion.
Been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor Randall to authorize the city manager to enter into the contract with Jacobs Engineering. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 11A is a consideration of a lease agreement with the Columbia, or related to the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the city council may know, there is a tower lease agreement that the city and the airport have had with US Cellular for a number of years, which has come due. And somewhat very foolishly, when I started as city manager, I told our airport manager that I could assist with this project, having recently negotiated a couple rooftop leases for Wasco County. And that was about a year ago. So that's part of the reason why I'm presenting this to you tonight, is I offered to take this on. And so included in your packet were 4 different documents capturing the lease agreement itself, a ground space, a generator sharing agreement, and a memorandum of lease. Much of the lease provisions are very similar. Major changes include an annual increase to the lease amount, or the monthly rent amount was increased from 2002 at $900 to $1,500 per month, as well as an option or initial payment at the start of the lease of about $2,500. There'll be annual 3% increases, and we better memorialized a revenue sharing agreement component where the tower company, whenever they lease to another company to allow them to attach to their tower, a portion of that revenue is shared with the city and the airport of approximately 25%. Also building upon prior leases, both the city and Klickitat County each are granted co-location rights on the tower, allowing us to install up to 3 attachment devices to the tower itself, which is not something that we have taken advantage of in prior years, but the chief of police and I have kind of been exploring options on that front to see if it makes sense with some of the radio equipment that we have here. The revenue from this lease is considered airport revenue, and so will go to support the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport. Its initial terms of 5 years would generate approximately $90,000. And then there's several additional terms, I think for an aggregate total, I wrote it down, of 30 years, which in my experience with negotiating some of the other tower lease agreements and rooftop agreements for Wasco County was an appropriate timeline for these long-term cell tower leases and rooftop attachment points. And so with that, that's a summary of the documents included in your packet. I should also note before I move on is that there is a generator sharing agreement, which was something that was a part of the former leases, but wasn't very fleshed out and detailed. And so this generator sharing agreement is a much improved version of what we could expect in the case of loss of power and how we can access the generator that's located on site to support any equipment that we may attach to it in the future. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, but I'd be looking for authorization to execute the 4 attached documents in your packet. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Klebs?
I'm sorry, could I take the liberty of offering one point of clarification? We are using one of those points of attachment already. We have been since the tower went up. That's for our SCADA system. And we negotiated this land use agreement and those attachment points back in 2004 with the original phase 2 of our SCADA development.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry
Thank
about
you
that.
for that additional clarification.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Comments? Council Runyon?
Yeah, we can't let Dave Anderson ever retire because the history is way too important to the city.
Well, I think he can come back after he's retired, attend our meetings, and anytime there's something on the agenda.
Well, and I was thinking we're very fortunate to have a city manager that had some experience coming in and doing this. This is pretty complicated stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it certainly takes some time, and it's somewhat challenging because when you're negotiating these lease agreements, USL relies on another division and their own people, and so there's a couple layers of communication that have to take place there. And to that point, to fully lay it all out, I do want to thank Councilor Runyon. There was a Scrivener's error in the whereas section of one of the documents where there was a duplicate whereas that will eliminate should this pass.
Okay, we're looking for a motion. Unless there's any other comments or questions.
I'll make.
Okay. Mayor Mays, I'll go ahead and make a motion. Let me just, double check. I move to authorize the city manager to execute the lease agreement with Oregon RSA number 2, Inc. and the Tower and Ground Space License Agreement, Generator Sharing Agreement, and Memorandum of Lease as presented.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Long to authorize the city manager to execute this lease agreement. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the city council will now meet in executive session under ORS 192.6602H to consult with legal counsel regarding the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Only staff designated by the agency and news media representatives are permitted to attend the executive session. News media representatives, staff, and agency board are directed not to report on any of the discussions that occurred during this session, except to state the general subject as previously announced. The city council will return to regular session if there is the need for action on the executive session time. No final action or decision may be taken in executive session. Any materials distributed will be collected at the end of the session. And with that, we will go into executive session. Thank you all. Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting in the absence of any other business to come before the city council. I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you